Welcome back, deep divers. Today, we're taking the plunge into one of history's most fascinating and misunderstood empires.
I'm excited for this one.
Me too.
Yeah.
We're talking about the Holy Roman Empire. Now, we're not just skimming the surface here. We're going deep.
Yeah.
Deep. We're going beyond the typical textbook stuff to uncover those surprising and impactful facts about this empire. So get ready for some aha moments.
It's going to be fun.
Yeah.
This empire, it wasn't a simple thing to grasp. Imagine Europe from, let's say, roughly 800 AD to 1806.
Okay.
This Holy Roman Empire wasn't like a single unified country like we think of today.
Right.
More like a patchwork
Yeah.
of kingdoms, duchies, bishoprics, free cities,
Yeah.
all loosely bound under an emperor.
So not your typical empire, then?
Not at all.
Okay, I'm already intrigued. And speaking of puzzles, I have to ask about the name Holy Roman Empire.
Yes.
I mean, Voltaire famously said it was in no way holy nor Roman nor an empire.
Right.
Was he just being, cheeky, or was there something to that?
Well, Voltaire, he did love a good dramatic statement, but
Sure.
I think he also hit a nerve.
Yeah.
You see, the name, especially as the empire evolved, it is kind of ironic.
Okay.
It wasn't even called the Holy Roman Empire until the 13th century. Before that, they used terms like the whole kingdom or even Christian empire to emphasize the connection to ancient Rome.
They wanted that.
They wanted that connection to Rome, that legacy. The idea was to position themselves as the inheritors of Roman power. And this is where the concept of translatio imperii comes in, the idea that authority had been transferred from the old Roman emperors to them.
So claiming that Roman legacy
Was huge.
was a big deal.
Huge.
It makes sense when you consider their first emperor, Charlemagne, crowned on Christmas Day, 800 AD.
Charlemagne. Talk about a way to kick things off.
Let's just start.
But after Charlemagne, things get a little messy, right?
Well, after Charlemagne, the empire, it fractured, leading to decades of disputes over succession.
It wasn't really until Otto I came along in 962 that the Holy Roman Empire, as we kind of know it, started to take shape.
And Otto I was German, which is when the empire really starts to shift its focus towards those German territories.
Exactly. That's when things really become centered on those German lands.
Okay, so we have an empire that's not really an empire centered on Germany, but claiming Roman heritage.
Exactly.
It's a lot to wrap your head around. But what I find fascinating is you have these emperors, and they're powerful figures, but they're constantly struggling to maintain control over all those different princes and bishops within the empire.
It's true.
So was that kind of built into the system from the start?
Yeah, you could say that it was this constant balancing act. The emperors needed the support of those princes and bishops to maintain their own power.
Okay.
But to get that support, they often had to grant concessions, which led to more fragmentation and autonomy within the empire.
Oh, so it's kind of a vicious cycle.
In a way, yeah.
Interesting.
A great example of this tension is the investiture controversy in the 11th century.
Oh, the investiture controversy. Now remind me what that was all about.
Essentially, it was this power struggle between the emperor and the pope over who had the right to appoint bishops.
Oh, that's right, the bishops.
At that time, bishops weren't just religious figures.
Okay.
They held a lot of political power.
Okay.
They often controlled large territories, so whoever got to appoint them,
Huge implications.
huge. It was a big deal.
So whoever controlled those bishops had a ton of influence.
Absolutely. The investiture controversy really established the Pope as a major player in the Holy Roman Empire's political system, and it limited the emperor's authority even further.
Wow, so it's not just the Pope that the emperors had to contend with.
Oh no, not just the Pope.
The princes were a force to be reckoned with, too.
Oh, absolutely.
Each dynasty, from the Ottonians to the Hohenstaufens and eventually the Habsburgs, they all left their mark on the empire,
They did.
constantly pushing and pulling for power.
Oh.
So speaking of the Habsburgs, they become almost synonymous with the Holy Roman Empire.
Right.
Right. But I understand they also had a lot of influence outside of the empire as well.
They did.
How did that impact their role within the empire?
That's a great question, and it really highlights the complexity of this empire. You see, the Habsburgs, they controlled vast territories outside the empire, particularly in Spain and the Netherlands.
Wow.
This gave them a unique position of power, but it also created conflicts of interest and competing priorities.
So they're juggling this role as emperor
Yes.
with all these other responsibilities and ambitions.
Exactly.
That sounds like a recipe for tension. What happened when those external pressures clashed with their imperial duties?
Well, that's where things get even more intricate. Sometimes their outside territories actually strengthen their position within the empire, giving them resources and leverage. But other times, it pulled them in different directions, leading to compromises and conflicts that weaken their imperial authority.
So it was a constant struggle.
Always a struggle.
It sounds like the Holy Roman Empire was less about a single strong ruler and more about managing these complex relationships and power dynamics.
Yeah, I'd say that's a pretty good way to put it.
So with all this tension and fragmentation, how did this empire even function?
Well, that's the paradox of the Holy Roman Empire. While its divisions created all these challenges, they also fostered a certain resilience, even innovation.
Okay, how so?
Think about it like this. Think about it like this, because the empire lacked a strong central authority.
Okay.
It actually created opportunities for growth and development in its various territories.
Wait, so you're saying that the thing that made the Holy Roman Empire seem weak,
Yeah.
its decentralized structure,
Yeah,
actually helped pave the way for economic advancement?
precisely. And we see this in the rise of these powerful trading cities like Augsburg,
Okay.
Nuremberg.
Yeah.
These cities with their relative autonomy and these thriving merchant communities, they became real hubs
Yeah.
of commerce and finance.
So while emperors and princes are busy battling it out, the seeds of capitalism are being sown in the marketplaces of these independent cities.
Exactly. It's a fascinating contrast.
It is. But didn't the empire's fragmented political structure also have a lasting impact on the development of modern states?
It did. The constant push and pull for power between the emperor and the territories actually led to those territories gradually strengthening their own institutions, laws, and identities.
So they had to be more self-reliant,
They had to.
which in a way laid the groundwork for those modern nation-states that would eventually emerge centuries later.
It's true.
So the Holy Roman Empire was like an accidental training ground for state building.
You could say that?
That's not something you typically associate with an empire.
No, not really.
But there's one piece of the puzzle I'm still struggling with.
Okay.
If the empire was so focused on these German territories,
Right.
why were they so obsessed with Italy? It seems like every other emperor was getting tangled up in Italian politics.
Italy held a special significance for the Holy Roman emperors,
Okay.
particularly during the Middle Ages.
Okay.
It was the heart of the old Roman Empire, the seat of the papacy,
Right.
and a region of immense cultural and economic importance.
So it was about more than just territory.
Absolutely.
It was about prestige, legacy.
It was about asserting their claim
Yeah.
as the true successors of the Roman emperors.
Trying to recapture a glorious past
Exactly.
rather than focus on the present.
Exactly. That's why we see emperors like Frederick Barbarossa, Frederick II,
Yeah.
pouring so much time and energy into Italian campaigns,
Even when things were falling apart back in Germany.
even when things were a mess back home.
But does that backfire?
Yeah.
Weren't those Italian campaigns often costly and ultimately unsuccessful?
Yeah, they were, and you raise a good point.
Yeah.
While the emperors were preoccupied with Italy, they often neglected the growing power of the princes within their own empire.
Oh, so it's like they were so focused on this idea of Rome that they kind of overlooked the realities of their own situation.
It's a classic case of ambition and the desire for historical legitimacy blinding even the most powerful rulers.
Yeah, it's a good reminder that history is full of these kinds of ironies.
Absolutely.
Okay, we've covered a lot of ground. The empire's unusual name, its fragmented structure, the rise of capitalism, and the emperor's Italian ambitions.
We have.
But what about the Reformation? How did this religious upheaval impact the already complex dynamics of the Holy Roman Empire?
It really shook things up. The Reformation was a major turning point for the empire. It challenged the existing power structures and led to some pretty dramatic shifts in the religious and political landscape.
So how did this religious upheaval impact the already complex dynamics of the Holy Roman Empire? Was it more of a unifying force, or did it just add to the existing divisions?
It was definitely more divisive. It shattered the religious unity that had existed for centuries, and it led to conflicts and power struggles that would transform the empire forever.
So it was kind of a powder keg waiting to explode.
Exactly. Martin Luther's ideas spread like wildfire, thanks in part to the printing press, which is a relatively new invention at the time.
Right.
So suddenly, religious debates were happening everywhere, in homes, in taverns, even on street corners.
Wow. So this wasn't just some abstract theological debate. It was really impacting people's lives.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
It was a time of intense religious fervor, and it really forced people to take sides.
So how did the authorities react to this sudden explosion of religious dissent. Were they able to contain it?
Well, at first they tried to suppress it. The Catholic Church saw this as a direct threat to its authority, and Emperor Charles V, who was a devout Catholic himself, tried to use his power to enforce religious unity.
But the Protestant movement was already too widespread by then, right?
Exactly. It was too deeply rooted in this desire for reform, and it couldn't be easily extinguished. It led to conflicts, unrest, even armed uprisings in different parts of the empire.
So it was a real mess.
It was. And it took decades of conflict and negotiation before some semblance of peace and order could be restored.
So how did they finally manage to achieve some sort of stability?
Well, the Peace of Augsburg in 1555 was a major turning point. It was an attempt to find a workable solution in this religiously divided empire.
Remind me what that entailed again.
Essentially, it established the principle of cuius regio, etis religio, which means whose realm, his religion. So basically, the ruler of each territory got to decide the religion of their subjects.
So if a prince converted to Protestantism, his entire territory would become Protestant.
Yes, that's the basic idea. It was less about individual religious freedom and more about maintaining peace and stability by aligning religious and political boundaries. Of course, it wasn't a perfect solution, but it was an attempt to deal with this complex situation.
So it seems like the Peace of Augsburg kind of formalized the fragmentation of the Holy Roman Empire along religious lines. It's fascinating how this entity managed to adapt, however imperfectly, to such a massive upheaval.
It is. It speaks to the resilience of the empire, but also to its inherent weaknesses. The seeds of its eventual decline were already sown in many ways.
That's a good point. So what were the key factors that ultimately led to its dissolution in 1806?
Well, we've already talked about a lot of them. The constant internal divisions, the power struggles, the obsession with Italy, the religious turmoil. But there are other factors, too.
Like what?
The rise of powerful nation-states outside of the empire, like France, put increasing pressure on its borders and resources. Then you have the 30 Years' War in the 17th century. A devastating conflict fueled in part by religious tensions that further weakened the empire.
Right.
Led to a significant loss of life and economic decline.
Yeah.
And then you have the rise of new ideas about government and sovereignty during the Enlightenment.
Oh, the Enlightenment. So the old order was being challenged on multiple fronts.
Exactly. And the final blow came from Napoleon Bonaparte.
Napoleon.
His conquests in the early 19th century really redrew the map of Europe. And in 1806, he forced the last Holy Roman Emperor, Francis II, to abdicate, officially bringing an end to the empire.
It's almost poetic how this empire that struggled for centuries was finally swept away by these forces of modernity.
It's a reminder that empires, no matter how powerful they seem, are ultimately fragile.
Yeah. And it's a reminder that history is full of these kinds of twists and turns.
Absolutely.
Well, we've covered a lot of ground today. It's been quite a journey.
It has.
From Voltaire's witty observation to the rise of capitalism, the birth of a nation, and the lasting legacy of this fascinating, complex entity.
The Holy Roman Empire. It may be gone, but it's definitely not forgotten.
Well said. And on that note, I think it's time to wrap up our deep dive into the Holy Roman Empire. Thank you for joining us on this incredible journey.
Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep diving deep.